Hey guys, so this piqued my interest today. I saw a blog post about Reddit, a former um, coding question they would give was to implement Conway's game of life. And Conway's game of life is basically, um, it's you can think of it as like a 2D like checkerboard. So there's cells in the board, and it can be of any size you like. And there's rules given. So you mark each cell in this array either alive or dead. And there's rules based on how many of your neighbors are alive, whether you become, whether a cell comes to life or if it dies or if it stays the same from generation to generation. And what you do is you iterate this over and over again, and you get these interesting patterns that sort of fall out, which I'll give you an example of. So, and I thought, I've never coded this, so it's just like a little fun little thing to do. So I wrote this up in Python, and I have a couple helper functions to start. Just a function to make a new board. So given a number of rows and columns, and I'm just using Python lists. So I put a 0 in the cell if it's dead and a 1 in the cell if it's alive. And I basically have like a list of lists here. So it's essentially a 2D array. I have a little print function. So this prints like a border, and then it prints the contents as either a hash symbol if the cell is alive, or just an empty space if it's dead. And I have a little function to clear the board, so this just sets everything to 0. I have a function to just create a random board, and so each cell has a 5% or whatever given chance of being alive. So this is just sort of random testing you can do with random cells or random board. And then you get into sort of the meat of the algorithm. So this is a function given a board and a cell coordinate. You compute how many of the neighbor cells are alive. So this returns the number of neighbor cells for a given cell that are alive. This is just bounds checking stuff. Like, if you can't reference cells that are off the edges of the board, right? So this is sort of just, I don't know, there's probably a better way to do that. And then we don't consider ourselves as a neighbor. That's sort of one of the common errors. So there's 8 neighbor cells, and then this is the step function, which basically iterates successive generations of the algorithm. So these are sort of the high level rules. Like there's 8 neighbor cells. There's an underpopulation uh, case where you basically change a cell from live to dead if it has 1 or fewer live neighbors. A live cell will survive to the next generation if it has 2 or 3 live neighbors, and an overpopulation condition. So a live cell with 4 more live neighbors becomes dead. And then reproduction. So dead cells with exactly 3 live neighbors become alive. And then, so essentially I just have like one copy of the board, and one of the other sort of common mistakes is you can't modify the board when you're evaluating it, or you can't modify a cell because it could be considered as a neighbor by the next cell or adjacent cells as you're evaluating them. So you sort of mess up the algorithm if you are changing things as you're going through the board and considering this. So what I do is I record the coordinates of the cells which I need to flip the value. So I iterate over the rows. These are the coordinates of the rows. These are the coordinates of the columns. I get a count of the live neighbors for that position. And if that position in the board is live and the count is less than or equal to 1, or it's greater than or equal to 4, then we turn it to dead. So I append it to the flips array. And then similarly, if the board is not alive, it's dead, and the count is 3, then we go from dead to live. So this is the reproduction case. So we flip that cell. And then, so after I've evaluated where I need to change things, then I just spin through that array and I flip. This is an XOR operation. So it turns a 0 to a 1 and a 1 into a 0. And then the main function is simple. I make a board of some given dimensions. Well, this is kind of redundant. I have a randomized call here, but actually what I do is I have another function off the top of the screen which inserts a glider gun. This is sort of a known structure in Conway's Game of Life, which produces what they call a glider. It's a symbol that sort of propagates along a diagonal. And then I just have an infinite loop. So I step the board, I print it to the screen, and then I just sleep for like 20 milliseconds. So I'll just run this for you. And, you know, excuse the sort of hokey ASCII art, but the glider, this glider gun function, wow, I slowed it down by, I think, highlighting something. But it creates this like top set of cells that are in this configuration, and then they sort of bounce back and forth, and they emit this like this pattern that propagates like along the diagonal. So it's kind of a pretty interesting pattern, and it's good validation that like my program is working if like this works, because this is sort of a known thing. You can look up online and see how it works. So I just thought that was kind of a fun little coding exercise to do. The function off the top of the screen is basically to insert the glider, so I just have a little ASCII art here, and then a function which basically inserts that into a given board at a given position. So yeah, it's just kind of like a fun little thing that I got a little interested in today. If I take out the glider gun and I do a random board, so this is going to have 10% of the cells will be on. You can see I'm just randomly setting some cells, and after a few generations, a lot of the cells that get set die, but then you get these patterns that sort of repeat. So you see this is sort of settled into a pattern where these like plus signs sort of like alternate one another. If I run it again, you'll see some of the sort of same things going on. These patterns will dance around after a while, and then after, so you can see a glider was going there for a second. After a while, they sort of fizzle out, and it becomes static. So it's kind of interesting, and this is just iterating, you know, the very simple rules of this like 50 times per second, and you get some interesting patterns. Oh, look, it's kind of like a heart shape. Kind of reminds me of fractals and stuff. But just a fun little program. I had a little time to kill today, so I thought this was kind of interesting. I wonder how long this is going to go. It looks like it's going to fizzle out soon. Yeah. So anyway, I hope everybody's well, and I hope you got something out of this.